In this video, I'm going to show you how we can print using layouts. So I have got the bracket drawing open. It's already completed. I've already got all of my dimensions. I've got my notes. It's looking good. Now I'm ready to move on and actually print this thing. So I have opened up a drawing. We're going to come back to this bracket, but I've just opened up a blank drawing so that we can talk about layouts and the different parts of printing using layouts. So this is a perfectly blank drawing. I've just opened it. And what I want to do is click over here just to show you in a blank drawing, we've got the model tab. This is where the dark background. This is where we do our drawing, where we've been this whole semester. But AutoCAD by default gives you two different layouts. They give you layout 1 and layout 2. You can always click on this little plus sign here to add a third layout. You can actually add up to 255 layouts, which is a little bit crazy, but I guess maybe somebody needs that many. I have seen drawings that have 20 layouts, depending on how big the project is. So we're going to click on this, just layout 1. And I just want to show you what we're looking at in here. So when you first open it up, you see this gray background with a white rectangle. Imagine that gray background is your desk. This white rectangle is a sheet of paper lying on that desk. So that is what it's really supposed to visually represent. You see two different things here. We've got two different rectangles inside that white space. This one right here, if I zoom in close, you can see it's a little dashed line. That dashed line lets you know that's your print margin. So your print margin changes depending on which printer you have. So once you set your printer current, it's going to find out what your printer's print margins are, how close to the edges it can get, and it'll update on here. So from printer to printer, this will vary. Anything that you have drawn outside of that dashed line is not going to print on your page, so do keep that in mind. Now, we do have this rectangle right here. I'm going to click on it. It is a rectangle. It is like as though you drew a rectangle just in AutoCAD. It just has special properties added to it. So this rectangle is now what's called a viewport. Viewports can be in any shape. By default, AutoCAD gives it to you as just a rectangle, but if you take intermediate CAD, we learned how to create our own viewports. It can be any closed off shape. It could be a circle, it could be a star even if you wanted for some reason to have a star shaped viewport. You can do custom viewports and everything. So by default, AutoCAD keeps it simple. It gives you one and it's a rectangle. So just like any rectangle though, you can adjust the sizes with the grips. We can grab this and make it any size that you need it to be. So what this viewport is though, this is the important thing. The viewport is like a window in your sheet of paper looking through to what you have drawn over here in model space. So I'm going to back this up. I'm actually going to undo a little bit. Oops. Undo a little bit just to get that viewport back to its normal size by default, just so we can see the defaults here. I'm going to come over here and I always do this lecture and I draw what I call my morning face. So let me hit F12 so I can see my dynamic entry over here. And I'm just going to draw a little circle. I'm going to draw another circle here. This is this is Ashley's morning face. All right. Come over here and get a little spline. I always joke. You haven't seen me in the mornings, but I promise I look like this. I would say before my coffee, but I do not drink coffee. So this is just me all the time. All right, so we've got our morning face, just whatever. This would be the same as you drawing your bracket. It's whatever you have drawn on here. I did turn off my grid. I didn't mention it, but I don't like having that grid on when I draw, so I always turn it off. So that's what I did kind of in the middle of talking a second ago. So I've got my little morning face drawn. I click over here to layout 1 and look what happens. I can see that face. So like I said, this is just a window looking into model space. So what I can do with this now, this is what's super cool about layouts. I'm going to click on this just to highlight the rectangle. I am in what's called paper space. I know I'm in paper space because I see the word paper down here. We're going to come back to that in just a second. But when I'm in paper space, I can select that rectangle. I'm going to press escape to deselect that rectangle. As I move my cursor around, you see how I have a crosshair right now? I have a crosshair no matter where I go. Then I come up here to where my ribbon is, and it turns into a pointer. So I know I'm in paper space when I see a crosshair all across this drawing area. I know I'm in paper space. Obviously, it says the word paper down there. I know I'm in paper space because I can select that viewport. When I select that viewport, I can come over here and actually set the drawing scale for my drawing. And this is hugely important. This is why layouts are so important. This is a really big deal. So I'm going to select down here. It pulls up this list of different drawing scales. So I can select 1:1. It zooms in and gets my drawing to be 1:1. It's a little bit too big for my drawing, but I can come in here and adjust the drawing scale. 1:2, 1:4. Now mine is a little bit off center, but I do just, we'll come back and talk about that in just a second as well. It is a little bit off center. That's fine. There's a way I can get in there and fix it. But what I want to show you, and this is just the really important thing, is that when you set that to say drawing scale 1:1 or drawing scale 1:2, those are actually your viewport. We call those viewport scale 1:1, viewport scale 1:2. It's full size. 1:2 is half size. 1:4, it's a quarter size. If you print this out right now and you lay down a scale and measure this, this will actually come out to be 1:4. It'll be a quarter of the size that it was originally drawn out. You have truly scaled this thing down. That is why viewports are so important. We can set true scales and actually measure objects based on that. So I'm going to come in here, now that we know how to set our scale, I'm going to come in here, I'm going to deselect this, and we've been in paper space this whole time, but I want to take you into what's called model space. So if you imagine this right here, when we're in paper space, like I said, this is a window. So if you imagine, I'm actually going to come over to layout too, because it'll probably be centered better. There we go. So this is a window, and don't think of this as creepy. I know it's a face, but right now this face has like walked up to our window. Picture it as your kids or a friend or somebody, not not a weird look out the window and there's somebody with their nose pressed up against the window. But okay, so somebody's right up there at your window. They are face to face with you. If you measure their face, they are 1:1. They're really truly at that scale. The viewport scale is them. I'm still standing inside the room looking out this window. I'm in paper space. Paper space is imagining I'm in this room. These are the walls on the side. This is the window, and I can see that face. This person just walked back a little bit. So they walked away from the window. They're at scale 1:2. Now they've walked back a little more. They're at a scale of 1:4. Now they've walked back, 1:10. They're a tenth of the size of what they normally were. This is them just backing away from the window. We're shrinking it down so that we're scaling the whole drawing on your into your viewport so it fits on the page. Imagine we're going to get that guest cottage to fit on this page. Our page is only 8.5 by 11, standard A size, basic sheet of paper. But we're going to get a whole entire 15-foot by 18-foot cabin to fit on it. We are just scaling this thing down so much. We're backing it away from the window so we can see the whole thing here. So that is kind of what's happening when you're setting that scale. You're just this object is moving further and further away, if you want to think of it like that. So I'm going to come back in here. I could have done it in either one of these. But what I'm going to do now, so that's us in paper space, setting the scale. Well, I'm going to go into model space. And so notice when I'm in paper space, I cannot select anything on there. I can select the rectangle that is the viewport. I can't select my face. But if I click on the word paper, I jump into what's called model space. Now, I know I'm in model space. Notice that viewport got really, really bold. Notice that I have my view cube up here. I have the little toolbar over here. I have my UCS over here. I've got that grid that I just can't stand. I'm going to turn off that grid. But now I'm in model space. I know I'm in model space. It says the word model over here. Not only is my viewport bold, but also look at my cursor. So I've got the crosshair until I get to the viewport. Once I cross out of the viewport, it turns into the pointer. Remember, in paper space, I had that crosshair the whole entire time. All right, so what I want to show you here is, look, I can select something. delete it. I can actually select things. It is exactly like being in the model tab. And it does get confusing. They're both called model because they're really the same place. They're virtually the same place. But I've got my model tab. Inside the layout, I have model space. You'll also hear it called M space. M space for model space, P space for paper space, because that's what you can type to get in between the two. So yeah, I can actually select everything in my drawing exactly as I could when I was in that model tab. I can no longer select the viewport. I can't click on that rectangle. I can't click on the viewport because I've really jumped through that window. Now I'm outside. I'm not standing in the room anymore. So but from here, if I roll my wheelie ball in and out, I'm zooming. I can pan. This is where I was saying, don't worry about it not being centered. I can pan just like I normally can. And I can also set my scale while I'm in here. So I can say 1 to 1. Ooh, it's just a little bit. I think it might fit actually. Let's do this. We're going to set this 1 to 1. Even though the viewport cuts it off, I think we still have enough room on this page. Let's check it out and see. So I'm going to come back over here to paper space. I'm going to select that viewport, and look, you can grab that viewport and just make it bigger. Let's see. Ooh, just barely. Oh my gosh, just barely. I got it to fit. So yeah, so now I've got this set 1 to 1. It's centered. It looks good. Once you've got your viewport set, I do want you to come over here. Notice this little padlock here. I want you to lock your viewport. What that does is it's going to lock it. Let me show you one thing. When I'm in paper space and I zoom in and out and I pan side to side, it's my whole sheet of paper. When I'm in model space, I zoom in and out and I pan side to side and it's just my object. What's going to happen when I lock the viewport? Let's set it 1 to 1. Ooh, let's just get it centered. If I lock it in here, even though I'm in model space, I am now locked. It kind of locks it in place, so I can't accidentally mess up the scale or anything. I can always unlock it if I need to change the viewport scale, but be sure and lock it back. It's always a good idea to lock that viewport once you get your scale set, once you get it centered the way that you want it. Now, another thing, I did this and I realized I did it without saying anything about it, but an easy way to get back and forth between model space and paper space. You can click on the word model. Now I'm in paper. Click on the word paper. Now I'm in model. You can, like I mentioned before, you can type M space. You can type P space if you like typing things. I think the easiest way to do it is you see where the viewport is. It's really bold. Double click outside the viewport. That puts you in paper space. Double click inside the viewport. That puts you in model space. So that is a really quick and easy way to do it. That's the way that I do it. But we're about to see where that can actually come back and kind of bite us. So I want to show you what's going to happen here. We're going to go back to the bracket. Now that we know enough, we've got the basics down, right? We had you guys draw within this magenta rectangle because we kind of had it measured out already. You didn't realize that, or maybe you did. If you click over here now on layout, you see that magenta rectangle. We had this centered. So if you kept everything inside the magenta rectangle, everything is going to turn out. It'll show up on your page just right. So now what we need to do, I put this little note in here so you could see it. In paper space, fill out your title block by double clicking on the text. Note, if you accidentally double click while not directly on the text, you may end up on model space on accident. So what I'm saying here is we're in paper space. I can double click on this and change the name. Ooh, all caps. Always use all caps, and nothing in this class will you ever use a lowercase. Bracket, looking good. All right. So I double clicked on this to edit the text. But if I don't have it highlighted, look, I'm going to zoom in. You see how it highlights when I'm over it? If I don't have it highlighted and I just double click maybe inside that B, it feels like I'm double clicking on the text, but look what happens. I double click to edit the text. Now I can't even select the text. I'm stuck. What do? This is because you accidentally put yourself into model space. The easiest way out is just click on the word model. You get back into paper space. Now in paper space, I can select this. I know this is in paper space because I don't see it in model space. It doesn't exist in model. So this is in paper space. So when you get ready to fill this out, you're going to come in here. One thing I do want you to do, click on this. I've got the viewport. Notice I pulled the viewport entirely off the page. That's just to kind of cover things. If everybody's going to be using a different printer, it just makes sure if you only have one viewport, you can pull it off the page entirely and it would totally work. Um, um, so we just have the whole entire page to fill out. We just need to make sure that we are staying within that dashed print margin. So now that we've got this all set up, we know how to fill this out. I do want to talk to you about why we have paper space and model space. So let's come back to this. This will make it an easier thing to do. Let's go to model. All right, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do single line text. I will just click somewhere. We're going to go with the default. We're going to set it to 0.2 and we're going to leave it at an angle of 0. This is model space text. Okay, looking good. Text 0.2, got it. I'm going to come in here. I don't really see it, so I'm going to set my viewport scale. Oops, I have it locked. Unlock it. It's good that I had it locked. Set it to 1 to 2. Lock it again. Come into paper space so I can see this is model space text. Looking good. I'm going to put text now that I'm in paper space. I'm going to do the same thing. I'll put it right here. Same text height, 0.2, and same rotation, 0. This is paper space text. All right, so here's the question. If they're both set to 0.2, why is my paper space text so much bigger than my model space text? The answer is we are set to a viewport scale of 1 to 2 in here. So I took that model space text and scaled it down. It's half the size that it should be right now. Not that it should be, half the size that it originally is. So if I unlock this, set my viewport back to 1 to 1, just want to show you these next to each other. They're the same size, right? So I can just change my viewport scale. 1 to 2 is what we're looking at. That looks good. But what if I were to set my viewport scale to 1 to 10? Oh my gosh, I can't even read that anymore, right? So we don't want that to get smaller with our drawing as we adjust the drawing scale. That's why we put some things in paper space, thus some things in model space. Typical things that you'll find in model space. You've definitely got your drawing and dimensions. Different people have different ideas. Some people put their notes in model space. Some people put their notes in paper space. I personally prefer it in paper space. We already had you guys for the chapter 4 projects. We already had you put it in model space, and that's totally fine. You don't have to change anything. So other things that you want to put in paper space. Let's see, a title block. You don't want your title block to get smaller every time you adjust the size of your drawing. So if I were to come in here, you guys don't have to do this. I'm just showing you. If I were to come here and adjust the size, we don't want our title block to get smaller, right? Other things would include like a parts list, or in your guest cottage, you have a window schedule. You don't want that to get smaller. So there's certain things that we'll just put in paper space so that it stays the same size no matter what viewport scale we're setting this drawing to. Another thing that I'm seeing here that I want to point out, notice how my viewport is orange. I created a viewport layer. I always do this. I'm going to come into paper space, just double click that here. I always do this. I'm going to create a layer, call it viewport. Ooh, viewport. You can choose any color you want. I'm partial to orange. I like to choose colors that I don't use typically in my drawings, so I choose orange. Plus, that's one of my favorite colors. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to set that to not print. You see that little printer? If you click on it, you get a little minus sign next to it. Older versions of AutoCAD had a little Ghostbusters or like a no smoking sign. I kind of missed that. It was cute. But now we just have a minus sign here. So I'm going to close that out. I've created a new layer. This layer and everything on that layer is not going to print. So I want to show you something. We're just going to print real quick. You don't have to worry about how to do this. I'm just showing this to you as an example. We'll have a video on how to print. By the way, you're probably going to have this educational version stamp. I have it, you have it, we're all going to have it, and it's totally fine. But what I'm in here to do is show you that viewport. Remember I said it was just a rectangle with special properties to make it into a viewport. So that rectangle is going to print. I'm going to see it on the page. We don't want to see viewports though. So I'm going to click on this. Set it to be on its own little special layer. Remember that layer is told not to print. So now when I print, go in, I'm just setting a random printer here, and I preview, look, my viewport's gone. What I need to be careful about though is if you're in here and you happen to have that one selected and you make a new layer and we call this morning face, make it another color just so we can see what's going on, looking good. And I come over here and I set my morning face. Here, let's just do the face. There we go, looking good. Come over here, got the morning face, I go to print and I preview. My morning face isn't there. So this is what happened. I had my viewport layer set current. When I made a copy of it, it made the copy have that little printer setting so that it wasn't going to print. Anything on that layer was not going to print. So I need to go, just click it, comes back on, and it's totally fine. It's going to print now. I'm showing this to you because this is a really common thing that I see with students. I would say every semester, at least a couple of students. Now I see it here when I preview. Every semester, at least a couple of students have this happen where they go to print the bracket and everything looks fine on their screen. And then they're like, oh my goodness, I printed it to the printer or I made a PDF or whatever. I don't see my hidden lines or I don't see my visible lines. Nothing's coming up, but it looks fine on my screen. If that happens to you, first thing you want to do is come in here and check and just make sure that whatever layer that is doesn't have that little minus sign on the printer. If it does, just click it, make the minus sign go away, and then that layer will print. So just a little quick tip right there if that happens to you, a little troubleshooting. All right, so this is it. We've talked about layouts, we've talked about paper space, model space, viewports, setting your viewport scale, locking your viewport. You can actually change, if you wanted to, you could change the name of this. We could call it bracket. You just double click it to change the name. I think that's pretty much it. Oh, one more thing. You know how we have, oh, I need to set this back, sorry. We're gonna go back to not 1 to 10, let's set it 1 to 2. All of these drawings, when you first start out, we've already got it set 1 to 2 and we've already got it locked. So when you're filling this out, I just want you to click on the viewport, double check, make sure it's 1 to 2 and locked. When we get to our capstone projects, you're going to have to set your own viewport scale. But for these, we're just kind of easing you into it. But one thing I want to point out is notice that I've got my hidden lines or my center lines. Let's go check it over here. Yeah, my center lines have a pattern to it. They're long, short, long, like the way that they should be. But when I look at it in here, they're not. They're just straight lines, they're continuous, and that should not be happening on all of my center lines. So the reason for this is we've adjusted our LT scale. You remember your line type scale, your LT scale is what adjusts how big or small your dashes are. So when you're doing your LT scale, we've got it all set up. It looks good in model space. This looks the way that you want it. You probably have already done that by this step by the time you're ready to print. But you click over here and it's gone. Once we get to start using layouts and paper space, we have a new line type scale. It's called PS LT scale. That is a paper space line type scale. Now, it's a system variable. We'll type it in just like we typed in LT scale. We're going to type in PS LT scale. That system variable is binary. It's either 1 or it's 0. So you would either set it 1 is on, 0 is off. By default, PS LT scale, by default, you can see it set to 1. I'm going to press escape and I'm going to tell you what's happening here. So imagine, this is what I usually use in the classroom where I teach this class. We have windows and you can look out the window and we're right next to a building that has a brick facade to it. We see the corner of that building right outside our window. It's got bricks. When I look at those bricks, the corner that's closest to me, they look almost full size, right? The further that building gets away from me, imagine, just a perspective drawing, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller the further it gets away from me. By the time it gets to the end of the building, I can't see the bricks anymore. They're so tiny. They've gotten so small, I can't see them. It's not that the bricks are not actually there. It's not that the bricks are truly getting smaller and smaller. I know they're all the same size, but from my vantage point, from my viewport, that viewport scale has just gotten so far away that I can't see it anymore. I can't see the brick pattern. And so that's what's happening. Once we come in here and start adjusting our viewport scale, the dashed lines are getting so far away that they're losing their clarity. They just look like a solid line. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in PSLT scale, press enter. You're going to type 0, press enter. And our EA should do it regen all. You really don't have to regen all. This just makes the screen look the way that it should. Did you notice how that came in? It just regenerates your screen. Even if you didn't regenerate your screen, this would still work. It's still going to print with those dashed lines. What we're doing is we're telling AutoCAD, it was set to 1. It's like, oh, PSLT scale. It's set to 1. It's on. You've made your viewport so small I can't even see that those lines are dashed anymore. Well, turning it off says to AutoCAD, hey, I know we can't technically see those, but I made those dashed. I need them to show dashed. So ignore the fact that our scale is too small to show that they're dashed. So anyway, yeah, you're going to go ahead and do that. I also, one more thing when you're printing this out, I do want to point out, it says over here, step 3, turn off the miter box and model space layers when you're about to plot your views. So we'll come over here and turn off. Miter box is already off. Model space, we want to turn that off. We don't want that, those words and that magenta rectangle to print in here, even though, yeah, I did set those to no plot. And I also set your viewport to no plot. Okay, so that is it. I know that was a whole lot to cover, but this is it. It's huge. Now that we know about this, you can move forward and start printing your projects. The first projects that we're working on are just going to have one layout a piece. So when you're filling this out, like the bracket project, this is going to be one of one. You're going to type in here. Also, your initials. If you want to abbreviate your name. What we don't want to have happen when you're filling this out, we don't want this to go over the edge or hang out past your border. So if you want to shorten your name, you can. If you need to like scooch it over a little bit, that's totally fine too. Yeah, you're going to go ahead and just fill all of this out. And yeah, I think that's it. I know this was a lot, but this is really, really important. This is the way we print nowadays. So this project is going to have one page to it, pretty much everything until our capstone project. Once we get to our capstone project, we're going to have multiple layouts within one drawing. So we'll have a video talking about that then. We don't really need to worry about that now though. So yep, that's it. Now you know how to plot using layouts, paper space, model space, viewport, setting your scale, all of that. All right, good luck.